3 weeks ago, just before the US elections, I posted a video on this channel listing my picks for stocks to own after the elections as we approach the arrival of a vaccine for coronavirus. Now, what I didn't expect is that all of these stocks would make money so quickly. I mean, I'm usually not that good. So today I want to revisit the stories. Does it still make sense to own these stocks? Some of them it probably does, and some of them you definitely should take profit here. And I'm going to add a few names to the list today. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, let's dive right in. So remember last time I talked about Tesla versus GM and the fact that GM is only about 10% of the market cap of Tesla, which obviously now is even smaller after what Tesla did this week. But remember, GM is actually catching up really fast in the EV space. And this week, Mary Barra, the CEO, announced a huge investment again, 30 new models in the EV space by 2025. And it's a story to follow. Last time I talked about GM, I said that's a stock to own. I think that's a stock to hold and keep owning. I think that's a stock that ultimately will do pretty well. But Tesla, it really was the kind of stole the show this week. Again, last time in the video, I talked about the potential inclusion in the S&P 500 on the next inclusion in December, which is what happened, right? We saw Tesla move from 400 to 500. We're back at the highs that we saw at the end of the summer. And so just for people to understand, if you know you're not sure about how this works with this inclusion and what that actually means, you have all these large asset managers, these mutual funds, pension funds, the funds that manage a lot of assets that track the index, right? They track the S&P 500, and they are forced to own whatever's in the index. And so now, when Tesla is going to be entering, in fact, Goldman Sachs came out with a study this week explaining that of the universe of about 200 of these funds that they track, only about 10 to 15% owned Tesla in their portfolios at the end of September, when they looked at the last filings that they have to file with the SEC. So in their estimates, there's about $8 billion worth of Tesla that will have to be bought, right? And so, look, we've already seen a huge move up this week by 22%. We moved from 400 to 500. I think that's a bit overdone in the short term. In fact, I sold some short-dated calls, struck at 560, 570. So we'll see how those do. But again, Tesla is so big at this point. It's the seventh biggest company in the S&P 500 when it enters. That the index managers are talking about doing this entry in 2 stages, simply because it's just going to affect the index too much. So I think Tesla in the long run is a company you want to own. I just don't know that you want to buy it at 500 now after that large move, right? If we see a pullback, again, back towards below 450 in the low 400s, you can buy there, but I think buying it at 500 after this huge move doesn't make much sense. Another stock that we talked about last time was Uber. Remember, Uber was trading somewhere in the mid-30s. Now it's at 50. In fact, I tried to short it this week because of what's happening with the coronavirus in the US again, with so many cases and just shut down in many activities, right? I don't think Uber in the short term is going to do well. But again, in the medium term, it's a good company to own. If you can get it again somewhere around 40, it's a company to own. You saw probably this week the Wedbush analyst raised the target price to $60. But again, you don't want to own it at 50, right? We had this huge move on the back of the vaccine news. We have 2 vaccines now with really high efficacy numbers. And so all these stocks like Uber and the airlines did really well. Talking about airlines, last time I mentioned Skywest and Delta, and I believe I talked about Hawaiian. I owned Hawaiian. Hawaiian went up by 50% on that on the day of the announcement of the Pfizer vaccine on the 9th of November. So obviously I took profit there, but I think the airlines, if you can get them lower again, you want to own them because they will again keep doing better and better. So talking about Hawaiian, if you can get Hawaiian below $15 per share, Delta in the low 30s, Skywest again, which flies for the 4 major carriers, right? Skywest is the regional carrier that flies for American, Alaska, Delta, United. They have the whole coronavirus crisis. They have been flying at 60, 65, 70% capacity. It's a stock you want to own if you can get it again somewhere in the mid 30s. Now, stocks that we haven't really talked about the last time that I think still make sense to get into if you can get them at reasonable levels, right? So obviously hotels. For example, Marriott went from $93 to $120. Again, if you see a pullback somewhere to 100, 105, that's a stock you want to load up on. Same with Hilton, same with Wynn Resorts. So if you see some kind of a volatility event running towards the end of the year, hotels, again, from the medium-term perspective, they will do really well once these occupancy rates will start climbing as people start getting vaccinated and start traveling again and kind of living again like we used to, or at least somewhat like we used to. Now, financials really got destroyed the day after the elections, right? Because suddenly the market realized that the Senate's likely going to remain Republican, which meant no big package, right? If there was a blue sweep, Democrats taking over the House and the Senate and the presidency, so that would probably mean a much bigger package. But we didn't see that. On the other hand, a few days later, when the vaccine news came out, the financials recovered all of this. Now, I don't really think that financials is a stock as a group, or is a group of stocks that you want to own necessarily immediately here, because the rates will remain low. Remember, the financials are kind of really correlated to what rates are doing. So when you look at the 10-year yield, we went back up to 1% after the vaccine news, but we're again backed away from that again. So if there's one financial that you want to buy, that's probably Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has a new CEO for the last 12 months or so. Charlie Scharf is making a lot of changes at Wells Fargo. Remember, they had a lot of scandals, a lot of issues with the Fed restricting how much they can grow, the size of the balance sheet. So Wells Fargo now is trading somewhere around $25. This was a stock that used to be at $50 or $60 per share. So if you're going to own a financial, I think Wells Fargo and potentially Morgan Stanley, which has a huge wealth management business. In fact, the wealth management business at Morgan Stanley is more than 50% of the overall bank now. So that's a business that's super stable in terms of revenues and that will keep doing well. Finally, a few more stocks that I want to talk about is Zoom, stocks that did really well over the last 6 months. So when you look at the full kind of whole tech complex, you're seeing this whole rotation between growth and value, right? So the growth stocks, the what we call the defensive stocks during the coronavirus, all the tech stocks, they're really not doing much here, right? You look at Apple and all the other, Microsofts of this world, they haven't done much over the last 3 weeks, simply because now that we have the vaccine news, people realize that world is kind of somehow gonna start shifting back to what it used to be. So stocks that did really well during the coronavirus, like Zoom, Peloton, they obviously backed away big time. But for example, Zoom is an amazing product. I use Zoom every day in my life. I make Zoom calls on a constant basis, and so I think it's the best product out there. So if you can get Zoom somewhere in the mid 300s over the long run, the results that they will keep announcing will kind of catch up with the high valuation that we saw, in the high 500s. Same with Peloton. Peloton orders are still there's still a backlog of orders. So if you order your Peloton bike today, you're going to wait a month or two. And I don't think people will go back to the gyms all that quickly. So Peloton will still keep doing reasonably well. But again, remember, once people start getting vaccinated and life goes back to normal, you're going to have less traction in that space. So I think that's about it when it comes to the list of stocks. That was one solid take talking about stocks here. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Give a like to the video, sign up to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in a few days.